The afternoon light coming through my studio window in Kensington Market had that particular October quality, pale gold, already tired, the kind that makes you feel like the day is ending before it really begins. I was surrounded by tile samples and grout swatches, trying to decide whether my client's Rosedale kitchen deserved the Calacatta marble or the more honest honed granite. When my phone rang and Jonah's name lit up the screen. We'd been together for 4 months. 4 months of easy Saturday mornings at the St. Lawrence Market, of him remembering I took my coffee with oat milk and no sugar. Of dinners where he actually listened when I talked about the difference between Art Deco and Art Nouveau, and why it mattered which one we were channeling in a heritage renovation. 4 months of feeling for the first time in a long time that I'd chosen correctly. So, he said, and I could hear the slightly nervous energy underneath the warmth. Sunday lunch at my parents' place. You still good? I set down the granite swatch. Jonah, you've texted me about this 3 times. I know. It's just, we're a lot. Big family, everyone talks over everyone. My mum will try to feed you into a coma. My dad will ask about your RRSP. I laughed. I have a very boring RRSP, I'll survive. There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. There's one thing I probably should have mentioned earlier. His voice shifted, not quite nervous, something more deliberate. My twin brother will be there, Cole. I put down the tile sample I'd been holding. You have a twin? Identical. We're very different. Another pause. He runs the other side of the family business. The side I left. The Voss family had money that didn't entirely announce itself. I'd noticed it in the way Jonah never quite explained certain connections. The deference other people gave him in restaurants. The discreet way security materialized at certain events. Different how? I asked carefully. Same face. He's 8 minutes older, and that's where the similarities end. A short, humorless sound. Cole stayed in. Manages the whole operation now. Just be careful around him, Sloan. He's not like me. The warning settled somewhere in my chest, small and thorny. Any other family members I should know about? We talked for another 20 minutes. Jonah walking me through the whole picture. His parents, Genevieve and Arthur Voss, originally from Quebec, who had built their empire through a combination of legitimate real estate development and considerably less transparent ventures. His older sister Celeste, a family lawyer with a reputation for surgical precision. His younger cousin Bastien, 23, still technically in university, already being introduced to the infrastructure of the family in the way young men in these families always were. After we hung up, I stood at my window looking out over the neighborhood. The Kensington Market Street below was doing its ordinary afternoon thing. Someone locking their bike, a dog pulling hard toward a shawarma place, 2 teenagers arguing about something on a phone. Normal city life. The kind I'd built carefully, incrementally, since the renovation practice I'd started from nothing 3 years ago. Jonah was worth whatever Sunday lunch complicated. Steady, attentive Jonah, who'd shown up at my studio once, with a coffee and a referral from his own architect, just because he thought it might help my business, who never made me feel observed when we were together, only seen. I spent Saturday preparing. Got a blowout, bought a new blazer. Dark forest green, structured, professional, without trying too hard. Something that said I take your family seriously, without saying I am terrified of your family, even though both were true. Sunday arrived gray and cold, the way only late October in Toronto can manage. Jonah picked me up at noon, visibly nervous in a charcoal wool coat, his dark hair slightly more careful than usual. You look great, he said, and kissed my cheek as I got in, and the familiar warmth of him made my shoulders drop half an inch. You look like you've had 3 coffees already, I told him. 4. He pulled into traffic heading toward the DVP. I'm fine. The drive to the Voss property in North York took 40 minutes past the city proper, and up into the kind of neighborhood where the houses sat far back from the street behind gates and old trees. The house itself was exactly what I'd pictured, a large stone and glass structure that managed to look both elegant and faintly impenetrable, the grounds immaculately kept in the specific way of people who employed full-time groundskeepers. Security waved us through with minimal conversation. Breathe, Jonah said quietly, parking near the front. I am breathing. You're breathing like someone who's about to present to city council. The interior was stunning, and I'm saying that as someone who has spent the last 3 years restoring heritage interiors for a living. Wide plank, white oak floors. Plaster ceiling medallions that were original. A kitchen that had been redone, beautifully, by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I noticed all of it in the way I always notice spaces, cataloging without meaning to. Genevieve Voss came to meet us in the hallway, and she was not what I'd expected. Smaller than I'd imagined, late 60s, with the kind of bone structure that makes certain women look better at 68 than they did at 35. She had Jonah's eyes and an energy that was both genuinely warm and quietly assessing at the same time. Sloane. She pulled me into a hug that smelled of something expensive and something baking. Finally. I've heard so much. Thank you for having me, Genevieve, I managed. You'll call me Jen. Genevieve is for the notary. She linked her arm through mine and steered me toward the dining room while Jonah followed, smiling at the back of my head. Come. Celeste is already here, and Arthur has been in the wine cellar for 20 minutes, which means he's either choosing something very good or hiding. The dining room held a long table, 8 settings, tall windows overlooking the back garden, where the last of the autumn color was still holding on, a credenza that I was fairly certain was original Macintosh. Arthur Voss stood at the head of the table, distinguished, silver at the temples, with a handshake that weighed and assessed and released, all in the span of 3 seconds. Interior restoration, he said. Jonah tells me you specialize in heritage properties. Pre-1940, primarily. Yes, good bones in this city. People ruin them. He said it with the authority of someone whose business had occasionally depended on properties with good bones. What's the biggest mistake people make? Thinking original features are problems instead of assets. I kept my voice steady. They strip out plasterwork to put up drywall, remove hardwood to pour concrete, then pay twice as much to put them back in 5 years later when trends change. Something shifted in his expression. Approval, maybe, or at least recalibration. Celeste appeared next. Early 40s, Genevieve's bone structure and Arthur's eyes, the measured handshake of someone whose professional life required her to read people faster than they could construct a version of themselves. Heritage restoration, she said. That's interesting. Jonah's previous partners were mostly in finance. Celeste. Jonah's voice carried a quiet warning. What? I'm establishing context. She shook my hand firmly. There was something in her expression I chose to interpret as interested rather than skeptical. Bastien arrived in the way young men in large families arrive. Filling space, radiating uncomplicated energy. 23 and still operating on the assumption that the world found him charming, which, to be fair, it largely did. You're way more interesting looking than the last one, he announced, which earned him a sharp look from Genevieve. Bastien. What? It's a compliment. He dropped into a chair. She was a Bay Street associate. All she talked about was deal flow. The family architecture was becoming legible to me the way rooms do. You walk in, you feel the proportions, you start to understand what the space is trying to do. Protective mother, weighing father, sharp-minded sister, guileless younger cousin still untouched by the family's sharper edges, and Jonah, the one who had built something separate from whatever the rest of this meant. We're just waiting on Cole, Genevieve said, glancing toward the hall. He's always late. Pretends it's business. Really, he just likes walking into rooms after everyone's settled. Jonah's hand found mine under the table. I squeezed once, trying to ignore the small flutter that accompanied the name. I heard him before I saw him. Footsteps in the hall, unhurried, measured, the particular quality of someone who has never needed to move quickly to get where they're going. A low exchange with someone near the door, and then Cole Voss walked in, and every coherent thought I had went briefly offline. Jonah had said identical. He hadn't explained what it would actually look like. 2 versions of the same man who had taken completely different directions. The same dark hair, same strong jaw, same tall frame. But where Jonah wore all of it with an approachable ease, Cole wore his like architecture, like something deliberately constructed. Navy suit, no tie, the collar open in a way that looked casual and wasn't. Dark eyes that moved across the room with the efficiency of someone running a threat assessment and an asset inventory simultaneously. I don't know exactly what happened next. Maybe it was 4 months of muscle memory. Maybe it was the disorienting effect of seeing a face I associated with safety walk through a door. Maybe it was some deep and catastrophically inconvenient failure of perception. Whatever it was, I stood up, which was already wrong, crossed the space between us, which was worse, rose slightly on my toes, and pressed a kiss directly to his mouth. For approximately 2 seconds, the world made complete sense. Then it didn't. The mouth under mine was not Jonah's. Firmer. Less familiar. A different cologne. Cedar and something darker and more complex. And the way he went still was not surprise. It was something more patient than that. Something that knew how to wait. I jerked back. My hand went to my mouth. The room had gone completely silent. Cole's expression had not changed. Not offense, not amusement, not shock. The same steady, measuring look, now turned entirely in my direction with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. "Wrong, brother," he said quietly, and his voice was lower than Jonah's, with an edge that made the words feel like something other than a correction. "Sweetheart." My face went hot. "I'm so sorry," I thought. "You look exactly." I was backing up, fully babbling, until my hip connected with a chair. Jonah appeared beside me. "Cole, this is Sloane." Sloane, my brother Cole, who I should have described more thoroughly. Sloane. Cole extended his hand with the composure of someone who had not just been kissed in front of his entire family. His grip was warm, firm, and he held my hand a fraction of a second longer than the situation required before releasing it. "A pleasure. I'm mortified," I said. Genuinely. "I don't normally just accost strangers. You're not a stranger if you're with my brother." Something flickered in those dark eyes. I'll admit it's the most interesting introduction I've had in recent memory. "Cole." Genevieve, from across the table, with the tone of someone who has been managing this particular dynamic for decades. "Stop looking at her like she's a file you're trying to reconstruct." "Like what?" He didn't look away from me. "Like you're solving something. Leave the poor woman alone. She made an honest mistake." Lunch proceeded with the controlled chaos Jonah had promised. Genevieve piling food onto everyone's plate regardless of what they'd already taken. Arthur asked measured, penetrating questions about the heritage property market. Celeste watching me with lawyer's eyes that I was beginning to find more reassuring than threatening. Bastian's jokes landing about 60% of the time. And Cole, always Cole, seated directly across from me, contributing less to the conversation than anyone else at the table, and somehow taking up more space than all of them combined. Every time I looked up, his attention was there. Steady, unhurried, not quite a stare, but something that accomplished the same effect. I focused on Jonah. Sweet, safe Jonah, who kept his hand on mine and sent me small encouraging looks across the table and made me feel, in the middle of all this, that I was doing fine. "So Sloane," Arthur said during a lull. "You grew up here? The city?" "Mississauga originally. My mum was a librarian. My dad worked for the city, transit planning. I left out the part where he died when I was 14, and my mum had worked 2 jobs and still somehow made sure I got to architecture school. They didn't need my whole biography." "Self-built then," Celeste observed. "That's increasingly rare in this business. I find it easier. No one else's expectations to live up to." "Smart," Cole said. It was the first thing he'd contributed in 15 minutes. "Debt is less complicated when it's to yourself." "Not all relationships end in debt," Jonah said. The words had an edge I wasn't used to hearing from him. "Most arrangements do." Cole's eyes found mine. The terms just aren't always made explicit at the start. The table went briefly quiet. I felt like I'd arrived midway through a conversation that had been going on for 30 years. "I'm an optimist," I said, before I could stop myself. "I believe in building things that last." Something shifted in Cole's expression, fast, almost imperceptible. Interest, maybe. Surprise. "An optimist working in heritage restoration," he said quietly. "Interesting combination. You spend your days working on things that were nearly lost." "That's why I do it," I said. "Because they're worth saving." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. The room felt like it had contracted slightly. After lunch, Jonah took me on a tour of the house while the family settled in the living room. The place was as extraordinary as I'd first assessed. Original plasterwork in the upstairs hall, a fireplace in the primary bedroom that someone at some point had thankfully decided not to brick over, windows that were either original or extremely good reproductions. I couldn't focus on any of it properly. My mind kept circling back to the moment, to the wrongness of it, the sensory dissonance I'd noticed too late. Different cologne, different stillness, the way he'd received the kiss rather than returned it. Wrong brother, sweetheart. He unsettled you, Jonah said, as we stood at the window at the end of the upstairs hall, looking out over the garden. I'm sorry. I should have described him better, warned you how identical we actually look. It's okay. I'm the one who should be apologizing. My brain just short-circuited. He was watching you all through lunch. Maybe he was just surprised. Cole doesn't do surprised. Jonah's voice was careful. He's 3 steps ahead of most situations. Whatever he was thinking while he was watching you, it wasn't surprise. We went back downstairs. I sat close to Jonah on the sofa, creating deliberate distance between myself and Cole, who had taken the armchair across from us, with the air of someone who had chosen it specifically. You have to come back next Sunday, Genevieve announced warmly. We do this every week. Tradition. I'd love that, I said, and meant it despite everything. On the drive home, Jonah was quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet. He liked you, he said finally, as we got on the 401. I couldn't tell. He barely said anything. Exactly. Cole talks in most situations. He controls conversations, runs the room. With you, he just watched. A beat. He's not a safe person, Sloane. I know that doesn't mean anything based on one lunch. But just keep your distance. Don't let him pull you in. I agreed, promised I would. Told Jonah everything was fine. That night, alone in my apartment, I lay in bed and thought about Cole Voss. About the way he'd looked at me across that table. About the barely there shift in his expression when I'd pushed back at him. About the warmth of his hand, the cedar of his cologne, and the particular quality of his stillness when I'd kissed him. Not surprise, not rejection. Something that knew how to wait. Wrong brother. Sweetheart. I turned off my lamp eventually, but it was a long time before I slept. The Cabottown Victorian I was restoring became my refuge for the following week. 3 floors of crumbling plaster and original pine floors, and a client who wanted the 1890s bones honored rather than hidden, which meant my days were full of decisions that had clear right and wrong answers. Unlike everything else, I'd made a mistake. An embarrassing, anomalous, completely explainable mistake. I was dating Jonah. Uncomplicated, warm, steady Jonah, who texted me photos of renovation disasters. He passed on his morning runs and thought it was funny. There was nothing to think about, except I couldn't stop thinking about it. My best friend Phoebe found me on Wednesday, staring at a wallpaper sample I'd been holding for at least 10 minutes. That paper is discontinued anyway, she said, setting down 2 coffees on my work table. And you're not actually looking at it. What happened? Phoebe and I had met in 2nd year at Ryerson. She'd held my hand through my thesis presentation, and I'd helped her move out of a spectacularly bad relationship in a pickup truck at 2 a.m. We didn't do polite fiction with each other. I met Jonah's family on Sunday, I said carefully. And? His mother was warm. His dad interrogated me, and I think I held my own. His sister is intense in a way I actually respect. His cousin is 23 in the most 23 way possible. I paused, and I accidentally kissed his twin brother. Phoebe put down her coffee very deliberately. You what? I explained it. The identical faces, the muscle memory, the 2 seconds that felt, inexplicably, like they made complete sense before they absolutely didn't. Okay, Phoebe said when I finished. Here's what I want to know. You've kissed Jonah plenty. What was different? I didn't want to answer that. I'd been avoiding the answer all week. Everything, I admitted quietly. The way he went still, his cologne, the texture of, I don't know. The whole thing. And how did the wrong twin react? He said. Wrong brother, sweetheart. And then watched me for the rest of lunch like I was something he was trying to figure out. Phoebe's eyes went wide. Is he there identical? That's not what I asked. She leaned forward. Is he specifically attractive to you in a way Jonah isn't? I wanted to say no. I wanted to say Jonah was the one I was with, the one I'd chosen, the one who made sense. Yes, I said. But it doesn't mean anything. Jonah is kind and present, and exactly the kind of relationship I've been trying to build toward. Cole is, Jonah told me himself, not safe. You have a history, Phoebe said carefully, of choosing people who are not safe. I know. The guy before Jonah was a documentary filmmaker who spent 4 months in northern Manitoba without cell service, and thought that was a totally reasonable thing to do to someone he was allegedly dating. Before him, I know, Phoebe. I'm just saying, Jonah is good for you. I've seen you with him. You're more relaxed than I've ever seen you. I know. She looked at me for a moment. But? My phone buzzed before I could answer. Jonah's name on the screen. Hey, I said, grateful for the interruption. Dinner tonight? I know it's last minute. His voice was warm, easy. That Indian place you've been wanting to try? We made plans. I hung up and tried to feel the uncomplicated pleasure of it. You're thinking about him, Phoebe said, not unkindly. I'm thinking about whether I can source a matching original window hardware for a 130-year-old sash window. Sure you are. She stood up, pulled on her coat. Just be careful, okay? Twins are complicated enough, without everything else in the mix. There's nothing in the mix. It was a mistake. That's what makes it complicated. She grabbed her coffee. The things we tell ourselves are nothing are usually something. Dinner with Jonah was at a Kensington Avenue restaurant I'd been wanting to try for months. Jonah knew the neighborhood, picked exactly the right table, ordered a bottle of Ontario Riesling that turned out to be genuinely excellent. Cole was there. He was at a corner table with two men whose body language suggested the meeting was professional, in the way that certain professional meetings are not quite what they look like. And the moment we walked in, his attention found me like something with its own gravitational field. Jonah saw him. His hand settled more firmly at my back. We can leave, he said quietly. But Cole was already standing, walking toward us with that unhurried stride. Jonah, Sloane. His voice was smooth, pleasant, giving nothing away, expected. We didn't realize you'd be here, Jonah said. I'm wrapping up. Cole's eyes moved to me. How have you been? Recovered from Sunday? Fully, thank you. I hope I didn't make things too uncomfortable. You were very gracious about it. It was genuinely the most memorable introduction I've had in years. Was that amusement in his voice? You have excellent instincts, just occasionally misdirected. Jonah's jaw tightened. We should get to our table. Of course. Cole stepped aside, but as we passed, his hand brushed my arm, barely, almost nothing, and the current it sent across my skin was entirely out of proportion to the contact. We sat on the opposite side of the restaurant. It should have been enough distance. It wasn't. He's doing this deliberately, Jonah said, his voice tight. Having dinner? Positioning himself where you'll be aware of him, watching to see if you'll look back. He reached across the table and took my hand. Cole plays very long, very strategic games, Sloane. Don't get drawn in. I wanted to tell him that he was wrong, that Cole meant nothing to me. Something stopped the words. Not honesty exactly. Just an inability to commit to a claim I wasn't sure I could support. What if we just left? I offered. That would be letting him win. Jonah's grip tightened. We're staying, we ordered. The food was everything the reviews had promised. Jonah talked about a deal he was navigating. I talked about the Cabottown restoration. We were fine. We were doing well. I was hyper-aware of Cole the entire time, of the way his meeting concluded, and his associates left, but he didn't. I need to use the washroom, I said. The hallway toward the back of the restaurant was narrow, lined with local artist prints. I locked myself in for a minute, leaned against the wall, and told myself to get it together. I was a 31-year-old woman, with a good relationship, and a business I had built from nothing and better things to do than spiral over a man I'd met once and kissed by accident. When I came out, Cole was leaning against the wall, across from the door. I stopped. What are you doing here? The words came out sharper than I intended. Waiting for you. He pushed off the wall and moved slightly closer, not threatening, just present in the particular way he had of making a space feel smaller. We should talk. About what? I kissed you by accident. It's done. Is it? Yes. He tilted his head, studying me. Because I don't think it is. Not for you, I'm with your brother, I know. He didn't move. He called me Tuesday, actually. Told me in very measured terms that you were with him. That family loyalty required I respect that. That stopped me cold. He what? Which, Cole continued, naturally made me more interested. Not because of the competition. I want to be clear about that. His dark eyes held mine. If this were about my brother, I would have walked away on Sunday. Cole Voss doesn't compete for things. The arrogance of that sentence should have been infuriating. It wasn't. So what is it about? I asked. Honesty. He moved closer, just slightly, cedar and something underneath it. You're with someone you care for and aren't in love with. You kissed me by mistake and felt something you weren't expecting. You've been thinking about that moment every day since and trying very hard not to. He paused. I can see your pulse from here. I kept my voice level with effort. You don't know anything about me. I know you built a business from scratch in one of the hardest markets in the country, which means you don't make decisions based on fear. I know you pushed back at me at Sunday lunch and didn't blink when I pushed back. I know you've been in that washroom for 4 minutes trying to talk yourself into being fine. His hand came up, and I thought, but he only tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture so gentle it felt like the most dangerous thing he'd done all evening. I know you're still standing here. This is inappropriate completely. He didn't retreat. That doesn't make it not real. I care about Jonah. I know you do. He's easy to care about, steady, uncomplicated, the kind of person who makes everything feel manageable. A pause. But manageable isn't what makes your hands shake. He's your brother. 8 minutes older. In everything that actually matters, we made completely different choices. His eyes held mine. Jonah sees you as something worth protecting. I see you as someone who doesn't need protecting. Footsteps in the hall, a server with a tray. Cole stepped back smoothly, the shift so practiced it should have been alarming. Think about it, he said quietly as the server passed. I'm patient, Sloane. I'll wait for you to stop arguing with yourself. He walked away. I stood in the corridor for a full minute before I remembered how to move. When I got back to the table, Jonah looked at my face and went very still. What happened? I ran into your brother in the hallway. I picked up my wine glass. We talked briefly, that's all. The lie tasted sour. Jonah's jaw worked. I told him to stay away from you. He mentioned that, and he didn't. We just talked, Sloane. He set down his fork. I know how my brother operates. When he decides something, he doesn't stop. Please don't let him convince you that whatever he's doing is something other than what it is. We left without finishing our meal. In the car, Jonah was quiet for a long time. I care about you more than I've cared about someone in years, he said finally. But I won't compete with Cole. I won't watch you get pulled toward him while we pretend everything is fine. A beat. If you want something else, I need to know now. The ultimatum hung in the dark interior of the car. I want to be with you, I said, and I meant it, every word. But as he kissed me goodnight and I went up to my apartment, I could still feel the weight of Cole's attention, like something that had decided to stay. Avoiding someone in a city the size of Toronto should be easy. It isn't when the someone in question seems to occupy the same gravity as the person you're still dating. Every art gallery opening became a calculation. Every West End restaurant a risk. For 3 weeks, I managed. I threw myself into the Cabbagtown restoration. I went to Sunday lunch at the Voss house and sat close to Jonah, and did not look across the table more than was polite. Then the text started, unknown number. I knew immediately, still thinking about that hallway. No pressure, just honesty. You deleted the last one without reading it. That's an answer too, but not the one you think. I deleted them. Told myself the flutter in my chest was annoyance. The second Sunday lunch arrived. I dressed carefully. Rust-colored wool dress, tailored nothing that could be read as trying. The drive to North York felt longer. Jonah talked about work. The tension coming off him was palpable. He'll be there, Jonah said as we came through the security gate. I asked Mum. Cole said specifically he was coming. Okay, that's not nothing, Sloane. I know. A pause. Have you been thinking about him? The question sat in the air. I could lie. I had been practicing lying about this for 3 weeks. Sometimes, I said quietly. But thinking isn't the same as choosing. Jonah's hands tightened on the wheel. Inside, the house felt slightly more familiar. Genevieve hugged me with the same genuine warmth. Arthur was in a complicated mood about something commercial real estate related. Celeste was on a deadline. Bastien had a new story about his professor. Cole stood at the living room windows, a glass of scotch in hand, and turned when I came in. Our eyes met across the room, and I felt the current of it. Still, after 3 weeks, still there. Lunch was quieter than the first. Cole contributed almost nothing to the conversation and absorbed everything. When I talked about the Cabbagtown project, he listened in the specific way he had of making you feel like what you were saying was the only thing worth listening to. Dedication's admirable, he said during a pause, though sometimes we disappear into work to avoid other things. Sometimes dedication is just dedication, I said, meeting his eyes. Not everything is a displacement behavior. True. He took a slow sip. In my experience, the things we insist are simple usually aren't. After lunch, Arthur retreated to calls. Bastien dragged Jonah outside to look at a car. Celeste went back to her laptop, and Genevieve disappeared into the kitchen. I was alone in the living room with Cole. I should have followed Genevieve. "You're avoiding me," he said, settling into the chair across from mine. "I'm dating your brother. Those aren't mutually exclusive." He set down his glass. "You've deleted every text I sent. How do you know I didn't read them? Because if you had, you'd have told me to stop. You're not someone who leaves things unresolved." He was right. I hated that he was right. "What do you actually want?" I asked. "Honesty." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Tell me you haven't thought about what happened in that restaurant hallway. Tell me you're in love with my brother. Say it and mean it, and I'll back off entirely. I care about Jonah. That's not what I asked." I stood and moved to the windows, the same position he'd been in when I arrived. The garden had gone mostly bare now, only a few stubborn leaves holding on. "You're asking me to hurt someone who's been nothing but good to me," I said. "I'm asking you to be honest with yourself." His voice came from directly behind me. I hadn't heard him move. "Jonah is safe. I understand the appeal. Especially when you've built everything you have through instability and uncertainty. Safe probably feels like breathing again. Don't do that. Don't psychoanalyze me. Then answer the question. Are you in love with him?" I turned and found him closer than I'd expected. Close enough to see the detail of him clearly, the lines at the corners of his eyes, the particular steadiness of his attention. "I could be," I said, "given time. Given the chance to build something real without interference. I'm not interfering, I'm being direct." His hand came up, hovering. "Jonah sees something precious to keep safe. Is that what you want? To be kept? And what do you see?" Someone who argues back. Someone who built something from nothing and didn't apologize for it. Someone who kissed me by accident and felt the difference. His thumb made contact with my cheekbone, the lightest possible pressure. Someone working very hard to make the rational choice instead of the honest one. I should have stepped away. Called for Jonah, left the room. "Tell me to stop," he said quietly. "Tell me you don't want this, and I'll walk away. I'll stay away from you both and let you build whatever you're building." The door was right there. Clean. Simple. One sentence. My breath had gone shallow. "I can't," I whispered. Cole's expression shifted, something unlocking in it, some quiet certainty. He kissed me, deliberate, unhurried, entirely focused. His hands slid into my hair, and the whole world tilted sideways, and I let it, gripped his jacket, and let myself be honest for the first time in 3 weeks. When we broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, he pressed his forehead to mine. "This is a terrible idea," I managed. "Probably." His thumb traced the line of my jaw. "Some terrible ideas are worth the complications." Footsteps in the hall, we separated. Jonah appeared in the doorway. His eyes moved across the room, my flushed face, the air between us that was still charged despite the distance, and went very still. "Everything okay?" His voice was careful in a way that told me he already knew. "Fine," I said. "Too fast." Cole said nothing. "I should go," I said. "Early start tomorrow." In the car, Jonah didn't speak for a long time. "Did he touch you?" he asked finally. I could lie, I should lie. But the guilt had already taken up residence. "Yes." His hands went white on the steering wheel. "And you let him?" Not a question. "Jonah." I knew. His voice cracked slightly at the edges. "From the moment you kissed him at Sunday lunch, I knew how this would go. Cole sees something he wants and he doesn't stop. That's not fair to either of us. This isn't just him." We pulled up in front of my building. He stared straight ahead. "I need you to decide, Sloane. Me or him. Because I can't watch this while pretending not to. Give me time. How much? I don't know." A week. He nodded once, jaw tight. "After that, if you haven't decided, I'll decide for you." I got out of the car on unsteady legs. Went upstairs and locked my door and stood in my kitchen for a while without turning the lights on. My phone buzzed. Cole's number. I'd saved it without entirely meaning to. "You kissed me back. That matters. Take the time he's giving you. But we both know what you're going to choose." I looked at the message for a long time. I didn't delete it. The week Jonah gave me felt both very long and not nearly long enough. I worked. I made decisions about window restoration and lime plaster mixes and reclaimed Douglas fir, and none of it helped. On Wednesday, Phoebe showed up at the job site with 2 Timmies and her most direct expression. "You look terrible," she said. "Thank you. When's the last time you slept properly?" "I sleep." "You're lying." She sat down on a sawhorse. "You have 6 days left of whatever Jonah's timer is." What's stopping you from deciding? Because choosing Cole means hurting someone who's been completely good to me. And I'm not sure I've properly examined whether this is just some kind of reaction to novelty. Okay. She handed me a coffee. But here's what I actually think. You've been in love with Cole since the moment you kissed him by accident, and the wrongness of it registered before your brain caught up. I watched you tell me the story. Your face was not a person describing an accident. I looked at the plaster wall I'd been preparing. Jonah deserves someone who chooses him first, she said more quietly, not someone who's talking herself into it. She wasn't wrong. I'd known it for days. The question was just whether I was willing to accept what I knew. My phone rang that afternoon. Arthur Voss. My stomach dropped. Sloan. His voice was less formal than I'd expected. I apologize for intruding. Do you have a moment? Of course. Genevieve's worried. She says there's something strained between you and the boys. She's usually right. A pause. May I tell you something that might not be my place to tell? All right. When Cole and Jonah were young, 9, 10, there was a girl in their class who they both liked. She gave Jonah a birthday card covered in stickers. He was very proud of it. A dry note entered his voice. Cole knew she'd meant it for him. She'd confused them, the way everyone did. Do you know what Cole did? Nothing. He let Jonah keep it. Let him believe it was for him. A pause. Even at 9 years old, Cole understood something Jonah didn't. That the right things come to you when they're ready. That patience is not the same as passivity. Another pause. I'm not telling you who to choose, Sloan. I want to be clear about that. Both my sons are worth choosing for different reasons. I'm only telling you that lying to yourself helps no one, least of all you. After we hung up, I sat in the empty Victorian I'd been slowly restoring. The afternoon light coming through the newly glazed windows, the plaster drying on the east wall, the wide pine floors solid under my feet. Everything I'd built through stubbornness and refusal to take shortcuts. That evening I texted Cole. We need to talk. His response was immediate. When and where? My studio. Tonight, 9 o'clock. I'll be there. He arrived exactly at 9, which somehow didn't surprise me. My studio in Kensington Market at night had a different quality. The street outside still lively. The light inside warm and concentrated. The fabric samples and elevation drawings and tile boards, giving everything the specific atmosphere of a space that's belonged entirely to me. Cole stood in the middle of it and looked around with genuine attention. This is you, he said. What do you mean? The space. It's exactly you, he turned. What you chose to put on the walls, the way you've organized it, what you kept and what you got rid of. His dark eyes found mine. I've been looking forward to seeing it. Why? Because I wanted to understand what you built before I asked you to be part of what I'm building. I sat on the edge of my work table, needing something solid behind me. That's a very large assumption. It is. He didn't apologize for it. Tell me it's wrong, Cole. Jonah will. I know. He moved closer. I know what this costs. I'm not asking you to do something painless. I'm asking you to do something true. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to look up to meet his eyes. You came here tonight to tell me you're choosing Jonah, that the sensible thing is the right thing, that I'm too complicated, too much, too different from what you've been building toward. His hands came up and framed my face with a gentleness that felt startling coming from him. But before you do, I want you to understand what I'm actually offering. I'm not offering safe, I'm offering real. Complicated, inconvenient, sometimes difficult real. And I think you already know which one you want. You just needed someone to tell you it was okay to want it. I looked at him. I actually looked, past the control and the careful construction of him at the man underneath. Complex and guarded and, I was beginning to understand, surprisingly careful with the things that mattered to him. Use, I said. I want you. Even though it's selfish and it's going to hurt your brother and complicate everything I've been trying to build. I still want you. Cole kissed me, slow and thorough, like he had all the time in the world and intended to use it properly. I need to tell Jonah in person, I said against his shoulder, when we finally stopped. He deserves that. Agreed. I'll be here when you're done. Jonah's import office was near the harbor front, the kind of space that managed to be both functional and quietly attractive. Good bones, well kept. His assistant recognized me and waved me through without a word, which meant he'd already told her I was coming. Jonah looked up from his desk when I knocked. You've decided, he said. I have. I sat down, hands in my lap. Jonah, you've been nothing but good to me, I know that. Everything about us has been exactly what I thought I wanted. But, his voice was careful, but I can't be with you when I have real feelings for your brother. It's not fair to you and it's not honest. He was quiet for a moment. That happened fast. I know how it looks, do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you came to a family lunch, kissed my brother by accident, and 6 weeks later you're ending what we had for him. It wasn't the accident that changed things, it was everything after it. I met his eyes. You deserve someone who doesn't have to convince herself, who chooses you completely. And Cole, his voice had gone very even. What does he deserve? The same. Someone who sees him clearly and picks him anyway. Jonah stood and moved to his window, the Toronto harbor gray and flat below. I warned you, he said. Told you he was strategic. That he doesn't stop when he decides he wants something. You were right, and you were also right that I got pulled in. A pause. But this isn't something that was done to me. I made this choice. He nodded once, slowly. My mother's going to be upset. I know. I'm sorry. Sunday dinners are going to be complicated for a while. Yes. He turned back from the window and the hurt in his face was real and honest and made my chest ache properly. I hope he makes you happy, he said finally. I genuinely do. Because Cole doesn't do things halfway and he won't make it easy. And if you chose him, you're going to find out very quickly what that actually means to live with. I know. Good. He picked up a pen from his desk, set it down again. For what it's worth, you're the kind of person I was trying to find. I was right about that part. So were you, I said quietly. I cried in the elevator on the way down. Let myself cry properly for the first time in weeks. For Jonah, for the thing we'd had that was real and good and wasn't enough. For the particular pain of choosing something true over something comfortable. Cole was parked outside, which I'd half expected and still wasn't entirely prepared for. When he saw my face, his expression shifted. The careful control dropping for just a moment. Come here, he said simply. I walked into his arms and let him hold me while I processed all of it. I've got you, he said, whatever comes next. And standing there by the harbor front with the October wind coming off the lake, held by a man I'd known for 6 weeks, and somehow understood more clearly than people I'd known for years. I believed him. The city found out within the week. That's Toronto. The circles Cole operated in were small and porous, and gossip about the Voss family had a particular velocity. Celeste called first. Sunday dinner, both of you. Mum insists, and when Mum insists in that particular way, we don't argue. Jonah is an adult who will manage himself appropriately at his mother's table. Cole's already confirmed. You're out of excuses. She hung up. Cole picked me up that Sunday in his dark blue Range Rover, auto-driving. A quiet, unreadable man who served as Cole's head of security and seemed to regard me with cautious approval, which I gathered was a significant endorsement. Nervous? Cole asked. Your mother told me not to hurt you, or she'd make me regret it. So yes. He smiled. She said that to you? Second Sunday lunch, right after hugging me. That's the highest compliment she gives. He took my hand. She told me the same thing about the situation from her end. Hurt Sloane and she'll be disappointed in me in that specific way I find worse than consequences. A pause. I took it seriously. The house felt different this time. I wasn't Jonah's girlfriend being introduced. I was Cole's. Whatever that word meant for someone like him. Genevieve hugged me at the door with the same warmth as always, then held my shoulders and looked at me directly. You hurt one of my sons, she said plainly. I know. I'm sorry for that. Good now. Cole barely lets anyone in. If you've gotten through those walls, you matter. Which means you matter to me. Her eyes sharpened. Don't make me regret it. I won't. She released me. Arthur made his grandmother's tourtière. It's cold out and you look like you haven't eaten enough this week. The lunch was its own particular surreal experience. Bastien behaved exactly the same as always, which I found genuinely comforting. Celeste asked pointed and intelligent questions about my work that felt more like acceptance than interrogation. Arthur included me in the conversation about real estate development with an ease that surprised me. Cole sat beside me instead of across from me, and the difference was significant. Jonah wasn't there. Work emergency, Genevieve said. Everyone at the table understood what that meant. Over dessert, tourtière, and then butter tarts because Genevieve did not believe in single dessert Sundays. Arthur set down his fork and looked at me. You've chosen the harder one, he said simply. Arthur. Cole's voice was low. It's an observation. Jonah would have given you easy, comfortable, room to breathe. He met my eyes. Cole will give you complicated, demanding, and honest, which is rarer. A pause. I just want to know that you understand the difference. I do, I said. I chose it anyway. Arthur nodded slowly. Good. Genevieve reached over and squeezed my hand. That evening, Cole took me through the property. Not the guest version, but the real one. The security infrastructure. The study where Arthur had conducted business that existed in the spaces between official records. The history of the family told through its architecture, its bones, its necessary concealed rooms. This is my world, Cole said, in the wine cellar that doubled as something more serious. The comfortable parts and the complicated parts. I want you to see it clearly before you go further in. I know what your family does, Cole. Knowing abstractly is different from living alongside it. His expression was serious. I manage the parts of our business that don't survive scrutiny. I protect family interests through methods that have nothing to do with anything legal. I have security because I need it, not because I like the theater of it. Are you trying to scare me off? I'm trying to be honest. I looked at him, the careful construction of him, the control, the genuine attentiveness underneath all of it. My mum worked 2 jobs after my dad died to keep us in a neighborhood where the school was decent. She did things to make ends meet that she never told me about, and I figured out gradually. I'm not naive about what survivals looks like. Something in his face shifted. Something real and unguarded. Most people pretend to be fine with this and aren't. I'm not pretending. I'm aware. A beat. Also, you have a piano in your penthouse that's actually been played. Someone who plays Chopin at 2 a.m. is not as frightening as they think they are. He stared at me. How do you know I play Chopin? The sheet music on the stand was the Nocturnes. A beat of silence. Then he laughed. Real, unguarded, completely different from anything I'd seen from him before. You're dangerous, he said. You keep saying that. I keep meaning it. We came back upstairs to find Jonah had arrived. He stood in the living room, drink in hand, face carefully composed. The room went quiet. Jonah, I said. It's my family's house. His voice was even. I'm allowed to be here, of course. His eyes moved to Cole, then back. You two look settled, Jonah. Genevieve's voice carried a quiet warning. I'm being civil, Mum. I'm perfectly civil. He took a sip of his drink. I wish you both well. I mean that. The bitterness underneath the words was faint but audible. I hope it's worth what you broke to get there. He left. The room exhaled. He'll come around, Celeste said into the silence. He always does. He just needs time to be furious first. Has this happened before? I asked. The 2 of them. Not exactly this, Celeste said carefully. But Cole's shadow has always been bigger than he tries to make it. Jonah's spent his life trying to prove he exists independently of it. You became the most recent evidence that he can't. The weight of that settled on me. Later, at Cole's penthouse, floor-to-ceiling glass, a city spread below us like something from a film, books everywhere. The piano I now knew he actually played. I stood at the windows while he poured wine. You're carrying Jonah's words, he said. He's not wrong that I hurt him. No, he's not. Cole came to stand beside me, handed me a glass. I'm not going to pretend this is uncomplicated. Choosing me comes with a family history and a brother who's going to need time, and a business that operates in places most people don't look directly at. He turned to face me fully. But I am going to tell you this once, and then I'm going to stop saying it. I am not sorry for wanting you. I'm not sorry for waiting. I'm not sorry we're here. I'm not asking you to be sorry. Good. His hand came up and framed my face with that particular gentleness that kept surprising me in him. Then stop apologizing for choosing true over manageable. We spent the rest of the evening talking. His history with the family business. The choices that had calcified into who he was. My father's death and what it had done to my sense of how much to count on permanence. The kind of conversation that only happens when something important has been decided. And you can finally say the things you'd been protecting. At 2 a.m, he called Otto to drive me home, walked me to the elevator, kissed me goodbye like it was something worth taking time over. Tomorrow will be hard still, he said. I know. It gets easier. How do you know? Because I've been waiting for this since you kissed me by accident in my mother's dining room. And I was right. So trust me on the timeline. 3 months after that Sunday, I understood that loving Cole and living with the reality of Cole were related but distinct experiences. The design community in Toronto is smaller than people think. Word traveled. There were pointed silences at industry events. A commission I'd been expecting quietly evaporated. A colleague I'd considered a friend made a comment at a gallery opening that I was told about secondhand and didn't want to think about too hard. "People are idiots," Phoebe said over wine at my apartment. "You didn't make this choice for social positioning." "I know. You made it because you couldn't help it, which is a different thing." Cole didn't waver. When a business associate made a comment at a dinner that was pointed and unpleasant, Cole removed the man from a significant deal with a thoroughness that had other people at the table going very quiet. When a gossip column ran something vague but legible, his lawyers moved quickly. "You can't litigate everyone who says something unkind," I told him. "Watch me." He looked up from his laptop. "You're mine. That means what comes at you comes at me. Those are the terms." It should have felt like control. It didn't. It felt like someone deciding that my right to exist in his world was worth defending. Jonah remained cold at family Sundays. Not cruel, just precisely measured, in a way that hurt more than anger would have. Genevieve smoothed things over. Arthur pretended not to notice. Bastien made jokes nobody laughed at. Celeste watched everything. It was exhausting in a specific and ongoing way. "We should go somewhere," Cole said one evening. "A week. No family politics, no industry gossip. I have a place in Prince Edward County, a farmhouse, quiet. Nothing to do but look at the lake and pretend nothing else exists." "That sounds extraordinary." "Next month. I'll clear the schedule." But the next month brought a discovery that rearranged everything. I was doing a final walkthrough on the Cabottown Victorian. Empty now, transformed, the plaster luminous, and the floors gleaming, and all 130 years of its history visible rather than buried, when nausea hit me with the sudden violence of something that had been waiting for the right moment. I barely made it to the site bathroom. Phoebe arrived 20 minutes later to find me sitting on the floor. "Food poisoning?" she asked. "Maybe." But even as I said it, I was counting backwards. Tired for 2 weeks. Emotional in ways I'd been attributing to stress. My last period had been, I tried to remember. Couldn't land on it. Sloan. Phoebe's voice changed completely. "When was your last period?" "I've been under a lot of stress." "How long?" I counted. 7 weeks, maybe 8. "Okay." She pulled me to my feet. "We're going to the Shoppers on Parliament right now." 20 minutes later, I was staring at 2 pink lines that were making the decision to rearrange my entire life without consulting me first. "Very positive," Phoebe said unnecessarily. I sat on the edge of the tub. "We've been together for 5 months. I know. His family is already navigating everything with Jonah. I know. My business is just starting to stabilize. I know." She sat beside me. "What do you want to do?" I pressed my hands to my stomach, still entirely flat. No evidence yet of the information that had just completely reoriented everything. "I'm keeping it," I said, and the certainty of it surprised me and then didn't. Phoebe exhaled. "Then we tell Cole." "Not yet. Give me a few days to find the words." I went home and worked, and tried to imagine how to tell a man I'd been with for 5 months that I was carrying his child, in the middle of a family situation that was already complicated. The opportunity came on a Thursday, at Cole's penthouse. He'd cooked, something he did on evenings when he wanted to decompress, moving through the kitchen with the economical precision he brought to everything. Seared salmon, roasted vegetables, something with lentils that smelled extraordinary. I watched him from the island. "You've been quiet all evening," he observed. "Long day." He looked at me with that particular focus. "You touch your collarbone when you're anxious. You've done it 14 times since you got here." I put my hand down. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I'm pregnant," I said, because there wasn't a better segue. Cole went completely still. Set down the spatula with exaggerated care. "Pregnant," he repeated. 8 weeks, approximately. "I've taken 3 tests." I was starting to ramble. "I know the timing is terrible and your family is already dealing with enough, and my career is finally—" He kissed me. Sudden and intense, and long enough that I lost my train of thought entirely. When he pulled back, his hands were framing my face. "You're carrying my child," he said, and his voice had a quality I hadn't heard from him before. Something rough and unguarded. "And you thought I would what? Be upset?" I didn't know what you'd be. I'll tell you what I am. His thumbs traced my cheekbones. I'm someone who spent most of his life building an empire his father started, managing variables, keeping everything controlled. And then you walked into my mother's dining room, kissed me by accident, and I felt something shift that I haven't been able to shift back. He pressed his forehead to mine. I want this baby, I want you. I want the future we're apparently already building, a beat. Is that clear enough? Very clear. We told his family the following Sunday. Genevieve wept immediately, happy and thorough about it, and started making plans before we'd finished the sentence. Arthur conducted the mental calculation Cole had predicted and concluded it strengthened something important. Celeste asked very pointed questions about our joint plans for the next 18 months. Bastien made 2 jokes that were actually funny and one that wasn't. Jonah left. No scene, no words, just quietly absent and then gone. He'll come around, Genevieve said. A baby changes how long people can maintain their distance. The months that followed were their own particular surreality. My body changed in ways I was still negotiating. The Cabbagtown restoration completed, and I took on 2 new commissions. Cole became, unexpectedly, someone I couldn't imagine not having in the room, not because he was easy, he wasn't, but because he was present in the most complete sense of the word. I didn't think I'd have this, he said one night, his hand on my stomach where our son was making his displeasure about my current sleeping position known. Something that's just ours, not family business, not obligation. Just choice. Is that what this is? That's all it is. He pressed his palm flat. You're it, Sloane. Whatever else I've built, this is the thing that matters. I love you, I said. I'd been saying it more frequently. He still looked slightly surprised every time, which I'd decided was one of my favorite things about him. Difficult, complicated, impossible you. I love you. He said it with the same directness he brought to everything. Both of you. He leaned down to the general vicinity of my stomach. You too, buddy. Be easier on your mother. Our son arrived 6 days early, on a gray February Tuesday that turned bright by the afternoon. Labor was fast and overwhelming, and Cole never left, his usual control fraying visibly as things progressed. Can't you give her something? He demanded of the midwife. Cole, I gripped his hand. I need you to be steady. Can you do that? He took a breath, nodded. Became the still point I needed, which I suspected cost him considerably. When the baby arrived, screaming, emphatic about his arrival, the midwife placed him on my chest and said he was perfect. I looked at the tiny person we'd made, dark hair, my mouth, Cole's stubborn jaw, completely himself and entirely ours. Thomas, I said, the name we'd been circling for weeks. Thomas Arthur. Cole's expression, looking at his son, was the most unguarded I'd ever seen it. Thomas Arthur Voss. I was thinking Thomas Arthur Voss Walsh, my mother's maiden name, so he has both of us. Cole looked up. His eyes were wet, which he was clearly deciding not to acknowledge. Thomas Arthur Voss Walsh is a very serious name for a person this small. He'll grow into it. Later, when it was just the 3 of us, the midwife gone, the city going on outside the window entirely without us, Cole holding his son with a carefulness that was its own kind of extraordinary. Cole looked up. I need to tell you something. What? Jonah came to see me 2 weeks ago, while you were at your last prenatal appointment. Cole looked down at Thomas, who was doing the unfocused, profound sleeping of the newly arrived. He said he was done being angry, that he'd watched the situation long enough to understand that what happened between you and me wasn't something either of us did to him, that any child of yours deserved an uncle who wasn't consumed by it. I felt something release in my chest. What did you say? That I was sorry for the years of damage before any of this, for taking up more space than I intended to, for not seeing what it cost him. He finally looked at me. We're not fixed. Might take a long time, but we're talking. The next afternoon brought the family. Genevieve arrived first, with enough gifts to supply a small nursery. Arthur with an resp already opened in Thomas's name. Celeste with a folder of documents and one single extremely soft stuffed bear. She tried to present casually. Bastien with a plush dinosaur roughly the size of Thomas himself. And Jonah, uncertain at the door but there. He's got your nose, he said, looking at Thomas in my arms. And Cole's chin, God help him. Want to hold him? He took Thomas with the careful focus of someone who hadn't held a baby before and was determined not to admit it. Something in his face softened in the way faces do. "Hi, Thomas," he said quietly. "I'm your Uncle Jonah, the reasonable one. Don't let your father tell you otherwise." Cole rolled his eyes, but he was smiling. A real smile, tired and complicated and genuine. We had come a long way from that first mistaken kiss in the Voss family dining room, from the weeks of impossible tension and a choice I'd avoided making until I couldn't, from the fallout and the gossip and the cold Sunday lunches and everything it had cost. Looking at Cole with his son in his arms, at Jonah making faces at his nephew, at the family gathered around us with the kind of love that gets complicated by history but doesn't stop being love, I knew what I knew. I'd kissed the wrong man first, then the right one, and the bravest thing I'd ever done was stop pretending I couldn't tell the difference. If this story touched something real for you, hit like. It helps us reach the people who need to hear it. And I want to know, what would you have done? Would you have chosen the steady one, the safe one, the one who made everything easier? Or would you have been brave enough, or foolish enough, to choose the one who saw you clearly? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone.